If you're a Philadelphia Eagles fan, there's a discussion that simply refuses to die. It doesn't matter the record. It doesn't matter the seed. It doesn't even matter that the team is the defending Super Bowl champion. The question keeps echoing louder and louder. Is this offense really in the right hand? Since week 1, the name Kevin Patullo has been under constant fire from the fan base. It wasn't gradual. It wasn't something that built over time. It was immediate. It took just one game for a large portion of fans to feel that something wasn't right. The offense looked stiff. The play calls felt predictable. The rhythm just wasn't there. And even now, with the Eagles entering the playoffs as the number 3 seed in the NFC, that frustration hasn't gone away. If anything, it has evolved. What started as raw emotion has turned into a structural debate. What's fascinating is that this conversation exploded at the exact moment the team should be the most unified. Just hours before the playoffs begin, prominent voices in the sports media started pushing an idea that would be unthinkable for many franchises, replacing the offensive coordinator in the middle of a winning season. And all of it gained serious momentum when a major name suddenly became available: Mike McDaniel. The former Miami Dolphins head coach was fired, and within hours, public calls emerged, urging the Philadelphia Eagles to act immediately, not after the season. Not if things go wrong. Now, analysts, journalists, and content creators openly argue that McDaniel should be brought in immediately, even if only as a consultant, just to make sure he's in the building. The idea is simple, yet explosive. Don't let that offensive mind end up somewhere else. Kevin Walsh of SportsGrid put it bluntly, saying the Eagles should hire McDaniel immediately, make him a consultant, and promise him the job once the season ends, regardless of the outcome. Others went even further. Brendan Deeg of The Score stated that if the Eagles ultimately fire Patullo, McDaniel should be their first and only choice. No debate. And some went as far as to say that even if the Eagles win the Super Bowl, the change should still happen. That alone tells you how deep the dissatisfaction surrounding Kevin Patullo truly is. Patullo took over the job with a massive vote of confidence. He inherited the role after Kellen Moore departed to become the head coach of the New Orleans Saints following the Super Bowl win. In theory, Patullo was supposed to simply keep the machine running. The roster was still loaded. The quarterback was the same. The offensive weapons were all there. But what showed up on the field was different. Patience with Patullo began to wear thin as early as the first game of the season, a win over the Dallas Cowboys. Even in victory, the feeling was that the offense wasn't maximizing its potential. And when that happens in week 1, alarms start ringing early. As the weeks passed, the numbers began telling a story that became impossible to ignore. Under Patullo, the Eagles fell to 24th in total offense, a dramatic contrast from the previous season when they finished 8th. The Saquon Barkley situation may be the most symbolic example. The reigning NFL Offensive Player of the Year went from a historic 2,000-yard season to barely surpassing 100 yards, playing essentially the same number of games. That's not just natural regression. It raises serious questions about scheme, play calling, and talent utilization. Things became so tense that the situation crossed the line beyond football. After a Week 13 loss to the Chicago Bears, Patullo's house was vandalized, a shameful, unacceptable incident that should never happen, but one that also illustrates the level of anger among part of the fan base. None of that, however, slowed the calls for change, and that's where Mike McDaniel comes back into the conversation. McDaniel is 42 years old and has spent nearly 2 decades in the NFL as an offensive assistant or head coach. In 4 seasons as the Dolphins head coach, he posted a 35-33 record and led the team to back-to-back playoff appearances in his first 2 years. More than the numbers, McDaniel is viewed as one of the most creative offensive minds in the league, a coach known for adapting schemes to his players, not forcing players into rigid systems. The idea of pairing him with Vic Fangio, aligning offense and defense in true synergy, is enough to fire up any Eagles fan's imagination. Fangio brings structure, discipline, and defensive clarity. McDaniel would bring creativity, motion, in-game adjustment, and offensive aggression. And here's the first key layer that intensifies the debate. There is an unavoidable comparison factor that weighs heavily against Patullo: The direction of today's NFL. The league is increasingly driven by flexible, dynamic, adaptable offenses. The top offensive coordinators are the ones who can change game plans during game, not just between weeks. When the Eagles' offense looks rigid at critical moments, comparisons to coaches like McDaniel become automatic. This isn't just about scoring more points. It's about looking unpredictable. And right now, that's something Philadelphia's offense rarely projects consistently. What's even more interesting is that the idea of McDaniel in Philadelphia didn't start now. Back in September, analysts like Deontay Lee of The Ringer were already, half joking, half serious, telling Nick Sirianni to keep an eye on future Eagles offensive coordinator Mike McDaniel. In other words, the seed was planted long ago, and McDaniel isn't the only name being discussed. Another recently fired coach has entered the conversation. Cliff Kingsbury, the former Washington Commanders offensive coordinator, is viewed as someone capable of building offenses around mobile, creative quarterbacks. Ted Nguyen of The Athletic even suggested that Philadelphia would be an ideal landing spot for Kingsbury, particularly if the goal is to adapt modern schemes inspired by the Shanahan coaching. All of this creates an extremely delicate situation for the Eagle. On one hand, you have a playoff team with a legitimate chance to make a deep run. On the other, there's a growing sense that the offense is underperforming relative to the talent on the roster. And when that happens, pressure for change mounts, even if that change feels radical given the timing. And this leads to the second critical layer of the debate. What makes this conversation even heavier is the factor of time. Super Bowl windows don't stay open forever. Rosters age, contracts expire, injuries happen. When a team believes it may be wasting one of those windows because of conservative decision or stubborn loyalty to something that clearly isn't working at the highest level, urgency takes over. For many fans, the Patullo debate isn't about personal preference, it's about historical urgency. The question becomes brutally simple. How much loyalty to Patullo is worth risking a Super Bowl window? Replacing an offensive coordinator in the middle of a playoff run is nearly unthinkable. But securing the future, while the opportunity still exists, is starting to feel logical to many. And this debate isn't going away anytime soon. If the Eagles are eliminated early, Patullo will almost certainly be the first name blamed. If the offense stalls in a big game, the narrative is already written. And if another team moves quickly to hire McDaniel, the regret in Philadelphia could be immediate. In the end, this isn't just about Kevin Patullo. It's about offensive identity. It's about maximizing talent. It's about refusing to accept less than what this roster should be capable of delivering. The Eagles are in a rare position, trying to win now while simultaneously questioning the future. Very few teams face that dilemma, and how the front office navigates it could define not just this postseason, but the next several years of the franchise. The discussion is wide open, the pressure is real, and the playoffs are rarely kind to teams that enter them carrying deep doubts about who's truly in charge of the offense.